Welcome to Game & Grains, the whiskey gaming channel. I'm your player one, Richard. In today's video, I'm going to be taking a look at A.J. Bond, a new Tennessee whiskey coming out of Sazerac? You heard that right. Sazerac is finally entering the realm of Tennessee whiskey, but how will its products stack up against industry giants like Jack Daniel's and George Dickel? We'll answer that question and several more in today's video. So grab your controllers, pour yourself a dram, and let's get into it. Sazerac took its first steps into producing its own Tennessee whiskey by first acquiring the Popcorn Sutton Distillery back in December of 2016. Now, although it chose to move away from the Popcorn Sutton brand, it did keep all of the equipment as well as all of its employees. Now, amongst those employees were its master distiller, John Lunn, and master blender, Elisa Henley. Now, Lunn and Henley had a long-standing working relationship and friendship that started well over a decade prior when they both started working at George Dickel. The two started working at the George Dickel distillery around the same time and quickly formed a friendship, or bond, over their lack of knowledge of the whiskey industry. Lunn came from a chemical engineering background, whereas Henley came from a business administration background. Now, as their knowledge of whiskey grew, so did their friendship. But eventually, Lunn would leave to become the master distiller over at the Popcorn Sutton Distillery. With the two still remaining friends, eventually Henley would join Lunn once again as the master blender of the Popcorn Sutton Distillery. Not long after, it was then acquired by Sazerac, and the two were given the task of producing a unique Tennessee whiskey. And the challenge was accepted, and its results are what you see here, the A.J. Bond Tennessee Whiskey. Now, with A.J. Bond being a Sazerac product, you know that it's going to be a real challenge to find out the things like mash bill and age statement. But as luck would have it, Master Distiller Elisa Henley recently went on the Whiskey Trip podcast where she talked a little bit more about the bottle. So first and foremost, A.J. Bond is a way of paying an homage to the two master distillers. So A is Elisa and J is going to be John. Now, unfortunately, John passed away in 2023 and passed that mantle of master distiller on to Elisa Henley. And then, of course, the bond part is just recognizing their bond and friendship of those two individuals. So the next thing is going to be how the distillate is made. So when they purchased the company from Popcorn Sutton Distilling, I believe it was originally a pot still, and the distillery itself was located in Newport, Tennessee. Well, Sazerac then took all that equipment to a new location, Laverne, Tennessee, and then also converted or added on a column still. So the distillate that is in here is actually a blend from their pot still and their column still. Now, as soon as they had set up shop in Laverne, Tennessee in 2017, they already started making whiskey. So the whiskey that is inside here is a combination of 6-year all the way up to 9-year whiskey. So it is a blend of column still and pot still whiskey aged from anywhere from 6-year all the way up to 9-year. Now, they did not disclose a specific mash bill, but we do know that it is a corn, rye, and malt barley, and it is a sour mash bill. Now, this particular product comes in at 95 proof and does go through the Lincoln County process. Now, one thing that I find fascinating that Elisa had talked about was their method of the Lincoln County process. Now, up until this episode, I assumed that the Lincoln County process that everyone used was the same as Jack Daniel's, where you have tons of that sugar maple charcoal and you just drip the whiskey or distillate through those charcoals. Well, Elisa had referenced that she uses the dunk method, which is very similar to what George Dickel does. What that simply is she has an 8-foot tall container full of that sugar maple charcoal, and she fills it to the brim and lets it just kind of steep. So she, being the master distiller, chooses to use the dunk method. Now, in my opinion, that sounds a little bit to me like what you would do with tea. And so, in theory, I would think you would have a richer and bolder flavor. So, we have that as well. Now, there are some other cool things that she discussed on that podcast, but rather than diving into that too much more, I would highly encourage you to check that episode out. I'll leave a link down to the Whiskey Trip podcast with the AJ Bond Master Distiller somewhere in the link below. All right, I've done a lot of talking because I find this product to be incredibly interesting, especially we're getting to witness it starting from the ground up. So, the question that I posed at the beginning is, how is this new Tennessee whiskey going to compare to brands that have long since kind of reigned the category of Tennessee whiskey? So today what we're going to do, or what I'm going to do, is I'm going to try the A.J. Bond Tennessee whiskey, give you my tasting notes, and then I'm going to compare it to these other two. Now, I'm not going to rate it one way or the other. I really just want to see how does this stack up to the kind of reigning champions or just brands that are out there right now. All right, we have the whiskey in the Glen, and so we're going to go ahead and start off with the A.J. Bond Tennessee whiskey, and we're just going to very briefly touch on these after, just to kind of get a sense as far as where this one lands between the current kind of reigning champs of the Tennessee whiskey world. So, in on the nose for A.J. Bond Tennessee whiskey. So the first thing that I'm picking up is a subtle sweetness, followed by like a slight earthy or dusty note. There's definitely that wood influence. It's a little bit bolder than maybe I would prefer, but it's not anything that's off-putting. Now, I will say when I first opened up this bottle, that those wood notes seem to really be a little bit more forward than this pour here. As you can see, I've kind of been experimenting with this bottle. So with a little bit of oxygen getting to the whiskey, it's really helped to kind of mellow out some of those more, I don't want to say offensive, but more bolder notes of those wood notes. So let's go ahead and get in on the taste. Cheers. All right, so not bad. You are getting some of those sweet notes that are there. There's the faintest hint. It's like a very dull, played down bit of sweetness. Not bad. I wish that it would be a little bit more, but that's all right. There is a slight hint of fruitiness there. And you can definitely taste that wood influence. Now, it is very smooth, as you would come to expect from a Tennessee whiskey. In my opinion, it is a little bit more flavorful, a little bit bolder than some of the other whiskeys that are Tennessee whiskeys that are out there, at least at the entry level point. Now, as we're going and talking about finish, it is lingering a little bit more on the tongue. As I'm talking, sitting kind of at mid palate, as it starts to dissipate, you are left with those kind of wood notes, but it does lead into just a slight bit of sweetness. Now, I am going to nose it just one more time because sometimes having that whiskey on your palate does impact the way that it smells. So one more time in on the nose. So if anything, really those sweet notes, all of those notes that I had gotten before really are just kind of amplified. It's almost like if you could take like a Honey Nut Cheerio or something of some variation of that and add like a slight wood note to it. Again, not in an offensive way. Just that's the best way I can think of to describe it. So one more time on the palate. Cheers. It doesn't really change from the first sip to the next sip. It pretty much tastes the same. So you are getting this slight sweetness, that honey, a little bit of the fruit notes, and then you're definitely going to pick up on those wood notes as well. Now, I do want to compare it to these other two, so I'm going to get a little bit of water to kind of cleanse my palate. So now, with Elisa Henley and John Lund coming from George Dickel, I would imagine that the distillate is going to be pretty much the same or pretty close to this product over here, especially with them picking up on their practices from their previous employer. So now I'll go ahead and tell you in full transparency, I've never owned a bottle of George Dickel. So this is actually my first true experience with the product itself. It's also worth mentioning that this is the highest proof of the three whiskeys here. This is 95, this is 90, and I believe Jack Daniel's is 80. So there is going to be some flavor discrepancies, obviously because of the proof point. So, all right, let's go ahead and try George Dickel as it compares to A.J. Bond. I don't know how I feel about this one. So I'm definitely picking up almost like a muskiness. There's a definite funk that is here. I am getting like an underlying banana, which I know is more traditional towards Jack Daniel's, but it is very faint and it definitely comes in on the back end. That muskiness is almost like damp wood. And then there's like a little bit of sweetness, maybe like a light honey. I don't know that I care for this, but let's get in on the palate. We got to give it a fair try. Cheers. Yeah, I don't know that I like that. At first, I was thinking of like a piece of like banana bubble gum that's kind of gone wrong. Again, but I've never had George Dickel before, so maybe I need to sip on it some more. Now comparing the two, because that's what we're doing, I will say that the flavors are definitely bolder here in the AJ Bond. I'm not getting any of that funk that I was describing here with the George Dickel. Definitely no banana note there. A little bit more wood influence, but that is a pleasant flavor compared to what this would, to me, reminds me of just like if you were to have a piece of wood that just kind of like sat outside in the rain for a while, maybe starting to decay a little bit. Again, I don't mean to poo-poo on George Dickel, especially with this being my first try. Maybe I need to have a couple more pours to truly understand this flavor, but I digress. Now, one more sip of water so we can get in on the Jack Daniel's and see how this compares to our AJ Bond. All right, so in on the nose, I like Jack Daniel's, especially in its higher proof form and its aged form. But I don't know that Old Number 7 is going to be something that I would drink every day. Definitely as a mixer, a good Jack and Coke or something like that. But I don't know. This tastes like if you could get like, if you remember Runts, they're like a hard candy and there's like bananas and stuff like that. You could put them in a little vending machine or candy machine. That's what I'm getting on the nose here. I mean, just that for days. Slight wood note to it, but just primarily those banana Runts. Okay, the flavor on the palate is way more better than the nose. Still lots of banana, a little bit more wood there. Not unpleasant, but certainly not something that I would gravitate towards, at least now that I'm a little bit more experienced in the world of whiskey. So if I had to compare these two, the flavor is going to be drastically different. Absolutely no banana there. A little bit more wood, or a lot more wood influence. The sweetness is going to be different. Again, this is going to be more of like a banana runt, where this one is going to have a little bit of honey, definitely some wood influence there. Kind of reminds me of like if you could combine like a honey nut Cheerio a little bit with a little bit of wood influence there. So honestly, out of the three, this is pretty good. Now, with this being whiskey that's blended from 6 to 9 years, I'm really curious as to how this would stand up against other products that these two brands have at a different age statement or a different proof point. I'd really like to put those kind of as a head-to-head challenge, but that's for a future video. Now, I will go ahead and mention that during the interview, Lisa Henley did mention that they also have wheat that is at their distillery. She did not disclose what they were going to do with that, but did mention that there's going to be a lot of fun and different products that will be coming out of AJ Bond in the near future. All right, guys, I realize that this is a slightly longer video, but I get real excited getting to talk about distilleries, especially new ones that come into play and really get to compete against some of the other well-known, more established distilleries out there. So last thing, I promise, and then we'll get you out of here. This was released June 1st of 2026. I believe they were launching it in Tennessee only, really because they wanted to give the Tennessee market first dibs before they send it out to other markets. So if you don't see AJ Bond Tennessee whiskey in your area yet, just hold tight, because I'm pretty sure that it'll be making out hopefully nationwide pretty soon. Again, with it being a Sazerac product, I would imagine that you're going to see it everywhere. So AJ Bond Tennessee whiskey, if you can get your hands on it, definitely give it a try. I'm sure that you will probably enjoy it. Now, thank you for sticking all the way with me to the end. In the comments below, let me know, has this hit your market yet? If so, have you tried it? What are your thoughts? How does it compare to the tried and true heavy hitters in the Tennessee whiskey realm? All right. Thank you, as always, for sticking until the end. I'm your favorite player one, Richard. Have a good one.